This is Tony with Cybercrowd, the news podcast that I'm starting. That is a small window in the Simona Petra monastery, the way they start their chants. But that's not why I started Cybercrowd. That's just the bumper music, or my attempt at bumper music. So I wanted to get started with something to kind of explain vulnerability management a little bit, of why we need to do vulnerability management. So I created this image from bug found to patch safe. And I wanted to discuss the log4j. This was last month, so now a 5-month old vulnerability. Everything is fixed now, right? Well, let's go into some details. So first of all, what does log4j do? So log4j records events, errors, and routine system operations, communicates diagnostic messages to the system administrator and users. So it is a little complicated because it's an open source software provided by the Apache Software Foundation. So it's Java based, but it creates logging within some of the Apache software. Apache is software that runs websites. So to give you an example of log4j at work, it's when you type in or click on a bad web link and get a 404 error message. The web server running the domain of the web link now says that there's no web page, and it records that, and it uses log4j to record it and tell the system administrator you just tried to go someplace that's not available. So that's what log4j is. Okay, so log4j got a vulnerability in December of 2021. And like I said, I'm trying to explain. So at a certain point, there's researchers every day of the year, pretty much. I mean, maybe they take a few days off, obviously, but anyway, researchers everywhere around the world are looking for vulnerabilities. Some of them are for the bad guys, and some of them are for the good guys. This is what happens all the time. So, and like nation states do this all the time. And by nation states, I mean North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran. Those are the bad guy nation states. The U.S. and U.K. and the Germans and etc. are the good guys. So we'll go and take it from there. So when a vulnerability is found by a researcher, they have to figure out a responsible method to disclose the vulnerability. So what they do is they contact, in this case, they would have contacted the Apache Software Foundation. So they contacted them and said, we found the vulnerability, you should fix this. So Apache is pretty quick to fix these kinds of things. Even though it's open source and, not too many people actually getting paid by Apache. Maybe they might have regular jobs, etc. It's the way open source works. It's another topic. Maybe I'll do a podcast on open source software sometime. But anyway, so when the researcher discloses to the public about this vulnerability, which is kind of what happened on December 12th, September 13th, we don't know when they actually found it, or I haven't looked it up. So I would guess that they found this vulnerability months before this. So maybe October, November, they found the vulnerability. They figured out a way to tell Apache, and then it became public. So when it becomes public, both the defenders and the attackers are feverishly trying to fix or attack, vulnerable machines. So at some point, the antivirus software, if they find an actual attack, they'll try to, see if they can detect the attack so they can deny the attack of working. But remember, antivirus software isn't really that useful. It might be about 50% effective. There's always new attacks coming, and it just can't keep up. Too many new attacks. So, at a certain point, the patch is released by the vendor. So at this point, the criminals are actively exploiting all the vulnerable machines. So at this point, your staff has to install the patch for it to actually make your system not vulnerable, but to make it safe. So here is where the problem resides. Okay, we got the patch. We know there's a vulnerability. You need to install it. If you don't install it, then you're still vulnerable. So there's a story here that said researchers did a search on the Shodan search engine to see how many apps vulnerable to Lockport shell are exposed to the internet. They identified 90,000 potential vulnerable internet-facing applications. 90,000, and that wasn't really that long after that attack, that release. So, and actually a few months later, I read a story where it said that there's over 800,000 unfortunate machines that haven't been patched. So the longer it goes on, the more likely you'll be attacked, and the longer it goes on, you really need to patch your systems. But why are we having so many problems for not patching our systems? That's the issue here. So I put together a little vignette. This is on my blog page. This little infrastructure is the infrastructure of an attack. Red Sky Alliance does a pretty good presentation of that. So I put together a little infographic that discusses why we may have like a catch-22 situation. So for example, users want functionality. We want to use our systems. We don't want to patch them and not use our systems, because we just want to use our systems. We don't want to reboot. There's a lot of things that we would not want to do that we should do, but that we don't really do. So for example, every time a change occurs, it must be logged and tracked. Because if you don't do that, then the next person that takes over for you, they may not know what you did. Users might have to have good password management. Nobody likes to keep track of 45 passwords. It's a tough thing to do. So you got to do it. You got to figure out your way to keep track of passwords. Can't get away from it until the day that there's no more passwords. You got to figure it out. And what if an employee leaves? Then you have to change passwords on a lot of machines. See what I'm saying? It's like all these little things that we should do, but for one reason or another, we end up not doing them, or we don't do them in the way that it should be done. And of course, you have to test systems. People don't like to test systems because it sometimes can cause problems, but it also takes time and effort. So, but I may think the number one thing is that we don't like to reboot. Who likes to reboot? Who likes to, shut down all of their files, reboot, and then they have to reopen everything? It's kind of a pain. Nobody likes to do it. So I wanted to show you Shodan and to show you how prevalent this is. This is exactly what that article was saying. This is the website, shodan.io. And right about a day ago, 6,200 systems have Bluekeep unpatched. Bluekeep is a Microsoft vulnerability. Vulnerable to a Heartbleed, 47,000 machines. Industrial control systems are vulnerable. Why is it that so many machines have these problems? Because there's a catch-22. It's like a disconnect. We are not getting it. We don't do what we're supposed to do. This is exactly why I created this blog. I created the blog post, so I created this podcast. I want to help people understand why they need to be doing what they should be doing. So that's basically what I want to do, and what I kind of came up with is Cybercrowd. So what happens? So maybe you don't want to do what you want to do, but maybe your friends will help you do the right things. You should do the right thing and patch and reboot. But maybe you're just not unwilling to do it, or something happens, you're too busy. Whatever the reason, it doesn't really matter. Maybe a friend can help you see the light. Cybercrowd, that's the whole point of it. So if you have questions, put your comments down in the comments of this podcast or video, or wherever I'm going to post it. And let me lead you out with my fancy Simona Petra. And what I'd like to say is thank you for listening. Cybercrowd. Friends have to ask others if they're auditing and testing for patches. And yeah, don't forget to buy my book to get started understanding why testing is important. Buy my book. Help your friends understand why testing vulnerability management is important. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.